Welcome to Ninerology. I'm your host, Alan, and another day, another story about Brandon Aiyuk. And Brandon Aiyuk and his camp released the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark. Jaden Daniels happened to be on that podcast as well. And the conversation has now shifted into, is Brandon Aiyuk going to get paid? Is he going to get traded? Or is he going to be forced to play on the fifth-year option? Now, there's one thing about Brandon Aiyuk that is very clear throughout this offseason. He knows how to viral market himself, but also how to negotiate through social media. That's one of the things that we've seen throughout this negotiation is that Brandon Aiyuk is not afraid of putting himself out there on social media and making his stance known to any of his followers. And so the question is, what are the 49ers going to do? Now, the flip side, the 49ers organization has all of the leverage here. All of it. Not some, all of the leverage. Why is that? Well, Brandon Aiyuk was drafted 5 years ago. And last year, the 49ers chose to activate and extend that fifth-year option. When you're a first-round pick, you get a 4-year deal with a team option for that fifth year. The 49ers exercised that fifth-year option, which means Brandon Aiyuk has another year regardless with the 49ers, unless, of course, he gets traded, something like that happens. If Brandon Aiyuk chooses to forego the season, he does not get that year accrual, which means the 49ers get to keep him for another year beyond that. Plus, the 49ers can still use 2 tag options for him. So the reality is the 49ers can keep him for at least 3 years without an extension. So all of the leverage is on the 49ers. Do they want to pay him what he's asking, or do they want to force him to come down to where they're at? Now, there were reports, Brandon Aiyuk let this be known in the Pivot podcast, that he felt that they were very close after the offseason. He was ready to fly to Santa Clara, but those details didn't emerge, and then all of a sudden, 6 wide receiver contracts came to fruition from there, which proves that the 49ers' habit of doing these contracts and extending them throughout the entire offseason bit them in the butt. The thing that they are notorious for lowballing and slowly ramping up until training camp, bit them in the butt and cost them several millions of dollars a year. The reality is, John Lynch and Parag need to answer to Jed York. They need to explain why they cost him several $million for the next several years if they choose to extend Brandon Aiyuk. Yeah, sorry, we like to play hardball and we cost you several $million. But the reality is they're not going to do that. But that's what this cost them. It cost them a lot of off-season drama and several millions of dollars out of Jed York's pockets. Now, what should the 49ers do? There's a lot of people in different camps on they need to extend him. They need to pay him. He is the 49ers offense because he's the only deep threat. He's the only one that can beat that one-on-one man coverage. There's people that say, you know what, trade him. He's already proving to be a cancer with his ego coming out during the offseason. He's not going to take a hometown discount. He's not afraid to basically throw his ego around without even getting paid yet. Typically, money reflects character. He hasn't even been paid yet. What is this going to look like? Is that going to show up in practice? Is that going to show up during the game where maybe he's not going all out every single play? The truth is, negotiations are always bring out the ugly side of the business. Players want to get paid. Organizations want to look out for themselves and find ways, how can we not pay as much as the market is. Somewhere in between, there is a desire to keep as many superstars on a team to remain competitive throughout the year. But there is one truth. The true colors come out on both sides for a player and the organization during negotiations. And Aiyuk isn't going to take a hometown discount. He's been very clear, if the 49ers aren't going to pay me, guess what? Somebody else will. Whether it's the Washington Commanders or it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been clear, if the 49ers don't pay him, he's willing to play for any of those teams. And what's interesting is he's name-dropping these teams. He didn't just say any other team. He is name-dropping them. He's been public about this and essentially calling the 49ers bluff by hanging out with Jaden Daniels publicly. Yes, they're close, but he's being very meticulous about posting social media posts with Jaden Daniels in those posts. Now, the flip side is the ugly side of the 49ers business is they are leaking that they offer $26 million a year, which probably would have gotten the deal done if they did it immediately after the Super Bowl, which they didn't do. That would have gotten the deal done. Now, Brandon Aiyuk's probably more like, you know what? I need at least $30 million a year because that's where the market's at for receivers that I outplayed. And he's got a point. So now the question is, what do the 49ers do? And you'll be interested to know that Ninerology's take is don't extend Brandon Aiyuk. Don't extend him unless he comes down to your asking price. I would say make him play out that 5th-year deal. That 5th-year deal is $14 million, which is great for the 49ers. It forces Brandon Aiyuk to be in another contract year. Yes, he could be upset. Yes, he can blow a bunch of smoke. The reality is he's already doing that, and that's not benefiting the team. Yes, he's spoken highly of Brock Purdy even during these negotiations, but you know who is out there working day in and day out? Deebo Samuel, and he's in a contract year as well, in the sense that he has no more guaranteed money beyond this year. So I think the thing is, who is the better team player right now? Right now, it's clearly Deebo Samuel. He's the one who's working with the rookies. He's the one who's working on his craft, where Brandon Aiyuk is, he's working out. He's showing some posts here and there, but he's worried about himself, not hanging out with 49ers players, hanging out with players from other teams. And that shows you, you know what? While yes, you got to look out. You want to make sure you're taking care of your family. You're getting the best contract to where if you were to get hurt, you and your family are taken care of for the foreseeable future. But the way he's handled it has been very immature, especially with how he's been posting these things. Yes, he's in the public eye. Yes, a lot of people know his name. Other teams are probably wanting him. The reality is that what you want on your roster, 49ers? This is a year where it's Super Bowl or bust. You're all in. Do you need those distractions moving forward even this year or beyond this year? And that has to be the question. Brandon Aiyuk is it's been a great story because when he was drafted, a lot of people thought the 49ers reached. And Brandon Aiyuk worked on his craft, started off in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan, then began working on his craft. We saw how great he runs his routes. Then he started developing, blocking all the way downfield. Then we started seeing him being able to beat that man-to-man press coverage. Then we saw him being able to do the gadget stuff. When Deebo Samuel got hurt, he started doing the end arounds, doing all of the nice, sweet outside zone runs. Those are the things that he began to do. So he can do everything on the field. But so can Deebo Samuel. Brandon Aiyuk, while you want to keep him because he's developed into the wide receiver because he's developed into the wide receiver that he is, you want to keep him. But at what risk? At the risk of you need to end up decimating your entire defensive roster to keep this guy, when the reality is there's Christian McCaffrey still on the offense. You still have Deebo Samuel. You still have George Kittle. You still have Jawan Jennings. You just drafted Ricky Pearsall. There are a lot of options for the 49ers, and they need to ask themselves, are we willing to bankrupt ourselves on offense? When the 49ers offense doesn't run through Aiyuk, when it doesn't run through him, when it runs through McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, are we willing to bend and break on this for a person who's possibly not sold out to be on this team and is hanging out more with players on other teams he's flirting with rather than his own teammates? And right here, I'm saying that the 49ers should not extend Brandon Aiyuk unless he comes down to the $26 million a year offer. Maybe 28 at most, but if anything more than that, don't bite. Force him to play out his 5th-year option and then tag him and trade him after that. And then there's other options there. There was talks of trading to the Washington Commanders for Terry McLaurin. Get another veteran receiver that runs similar to Brandon Aiyuk, but also not at the expense, but also get some additional draft capital. That's what the 49ers should do. Don't extend Brandon Aiyuk unless he's willing to come down. Force him to play that 5th-year option and then tag and trade him. And that will help secure you financially to continue to stay competitive even after you pay Brock Purdy and be able to get those free agents you typically do during the trade deadline. That way you can get that 6th Lombardi. Well, that's all we have for you today at Ninerology. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.